Vigil, Ante, and the Vigilante Antics by BelleAmant. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 4. For Our Future. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when his life changed for the worse. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when the world took away everything from him. His mother, his home, his chance to have a quirk, his first friend. Everything disappeared, leaving Izuku behind. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when his life changed for the better. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when the world took away everything. But Izuku found more. His new friend, new motivation, a new chance to help others. Everything disappeared, but Izuku surged ahead. Setbacks came quickly, rushing at him and knocking him down like tidal waves. They were never slow going. They were never seen a mile away. They weren't dodgeable, and Izuku found himself flat on his face. But rising up took time. It took time, and persistence, and stubbornness. It took a goal. It took strength to get up and rise against the odds, to look up to the sky and scream, "Watch me, world! I can do it!" It took years, but Izuku Midoriya was willing to do what he had to, in order to help others. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when he and his friends started working towards their goal. He was 4 years old, far too young to make a difference, but everything he did would impact how much he could change the future. So, he began to train. "All great heroes start off by training," Izuku said to Shinzo as they sat in the reading room. He pulled out a notebook, one that had been buried in the supply closet and was covered in dust. Brushing it off, the boy said, "I doubt vigilantes are any different." "Obviously," Shinzo agreed, watching as Izuku picked up a pencil. "So, we train?" "Yeah, we need to make a schedule, don't we?" Izuku started writing on the cover, eyes glinting with determination. "Why?" Shinzo asked, violet eyes full of confusion. "So we can track our progress. We need to make sure we train our whole bodies and find time for everything else." "Everything else?" "You know." Izuku finished the first word, going on to the second. "We need to keep reading so we get smarter. Hata-san said school already started back up, and while we don't have to go to school for a few more years, we still need to be ready." "But school means dealing with other kids," Shinzo complained. "I don't want to deal with the other kids." Izuku frowned, pencil pausing in his writing. "Me neither. Most people don't like me once they find out I'm quirkless." "And they hate me when they find out my quirk," Shinzo added, and that was all it took for Izuku to decide. "Alright, we're not going to school." "We aren't?" Shinzo looked at Izuku oddly, but the greenette just beat back. "We alone on our own. I'm sure Hata-san would let us be homeschooled." "We can't be homeschooled, silly. We don't have a home," Shinzo snorted, and Izuku frowned. "Right. What about online school? We don't have computers." "The library does, though." Izuku looked excited, hands shaking as he vibrated in place. Shinzo smiled at his friend. "Alright, that could work. Then we don't have to plan training around school. We can do it the other way around." "Yeah, and that gives us more time to learn how to make weapons and stuff." "Yeah." Shinzo was practically vibrating too by that point. He calmed himself down enough to ask, "So, we have a plan?" "Yup." Izuku set down the pencil, holding up his notebook with pride. For Our Future, number 1, was proudly written on the cover for all to see. Izuku and Shinzo followed the notebook to the letter, the two boys creating training schedules and completing them every single time. It wasn't always easy. Some things, like convincing Mrs. Hata to put them into online school, were manageable. It didn't take long for the boys to break down all of Mrs. Hata's reasons against the idea. "Want you to be lonely?" Mrs. Hata asked, eyes more tired and more worried than they had been only a few months ago. "It'll just be you two, no other kids to play with." "Shinzo-kun and I don't play with anyone else anyways," Izuku responded easily, not seeing how the words worried Mrs. Hata even more. "We spend all day together, just the two of us. We're used to it." Shinzo tried to comfort the worker, but the words didn't really help. Mrs. Hata sighed, crouching to look the boys in the eyes. "Don't you think it might be too tough? You'd have to keep track of everything, all on your own. You wouldn't have a teacher to remind you to do your work." "Midoriya-kun has that covered," Shinzo said. "He likes making schedules." "I do. I have our whole future planned out," Izuku added, and Mrs. Hata sighed again. "You do, don't you?" She seemed to be speaking more to herself, but Izuku nodded anyways. "Yep, we'd be fine on our own. We'd just be in the library." "By yourself? All day?" "It's not far away. We'd be good, and we won't cause trouble or nothing." I'm not worried that the boys will cause trouble, Mrs. Hata admitted, and sighed one more time. You two promised you'll be safe? You'll do your work? You won't just goof off, will you? You'll be safe, Shinzo promised. We'll do our work, Izuku said next. We won't goof off, they said in sync, and Mrs. Hata laughed. Alright, boys, when you two are 6, I'll enroll you into 1st grade. Fair? They knew better than to disagree. But not everything was that easy. At 4 years old, the boys had 2 years to wait in order to have an excuse to be gone all day. At 4 years old, the boys couldn't just walk out of the orphanage and come back hours later. They were young, and if any of the workers found out, they'd be done for. During the day, at least. Shinzo was right the day he first arrived. The forever opened window was good for sneaking out. The boys managed their first escape in November, 2 months after they started planning. With a bit of teamwork and some awkward jumps, they got themselves outside. They were back inside 10 months later. Let's wait until it warms up, Shinzo muttered, crawling under the covers. Izuku's covers, to be precise, but the boy was too cold to be on his own. Yeah, makes sense, Izuku agreed, and the two fell asleep shivering from excitement and the temperature. Since the boys couldn't start sneaking off right away, they trained indoors. In their reading room, to be more precise. They couldn't do much, but they ran through basic exercises every day, slowly being able to do a few more push-ups, a couple more sit-ups, and so on and so forth with each attempt. It was slow, but it was progress. Life dragged on, the boys using every minute, every spare moment to their advantage. Laying around did nothing. Taking a day off meant being a day later to being useful, so they pushed themselves. With every passing year, the boys did more and more. When they were 5, they spent the summer nights sneaking out and exploring the city. Their favorite spot became the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Covered in trash, the area was exactly what they needed. It was deserted. Nobody wanted to come to such a disgusting area. That meant the boys could train there without risk of being seen. And the trash itself was useful. The boys quickly realized that all of the broken machinery could be used for creating gadgets, and that was all they needed to make the spot their new hangout area. Life continued from there. By the time they were 6, the two boys had a routine set in place. They jogged early in the morning, then went to the library for online school. They returned to the orphanage for lunch, then went to the beach to train and try making weapons. Life continued on, day by day. They were 7 years old when Izuku made their first weapons. They weren't anything special, simply a pair of metal stars, but they were something. We can do it, Shinzo whispered, twirling his staff around. We can really do this? Izuku laughed, lunging forwards as he attacked a makeshift dummy composed of a broken microwave and a messed up shelf. Of course we can, Hitoshi! We're going to help people! Time flew by. With every year, the boys improved even more than before. By 8 years old, they were finally starting to surge ahead. They poured their hearts into everything they did, and their work paid off. Without a teacher to set their pace, the boys raced ahead in their classwork, worked through harder and harder classes, and learned everything they could that would better their work as vigilantes. They read dozens of books on mechanics and gadgets and heroes, anything and everything that could benefit them. And benefits came, setbacks no longer an issue like they were before. Izuku was 8 years old when he made his favorite weapon. It was simple, yet sturdy, a staff that could break apart into two and merge together seamlessly. The connecting halves had a slight edge, nothing to break skin, but definitely more painful than the blunt end on the other side. He made Shinzo weapons as well, but the boy seemed to like a metal baseball bat that he had found more than anything else. The two still trained daily, and no one was the wiser. Until someone was. Izuku and Shinzo were leaning against one another as the boys tinkered with the gadgets, using the scrap metals they had scavenged so far. They were too tired to sit up straight, the 8-year-old boys exhausted after sparring with one another. Everything was calm, the two simply working in silence. Then they heard the sound of trash falling, metal thumping against the sand. Izuku locked eyes with Shinzo, both boys tense. You heard that, right? Izuku whispered, and Shinzo nodded. Silently, they reached for the costumes, patched up ski masks that hid their faces. Feeling slightly better with a sense of anonymity, the boys stood, grabbing their trusted weapons and sneaking over to the source. It was a young man, maybe not even an adult yet. Even then, he was intimidating. Sections of skin were scarred, stitches surrounding his face like he was a doll. His blue eyes darted around the area, searching, analyzing. Those eyes landed on the boys, and he grinned. It was odd, watching his scarred skin stretch, following the grin but looking pain all the while.
Well, well, well,
the imposter started.
What do we have here?
He stepped closer. The boys held their ground. Why are you here? Izuku asked, trying to lock eyes with the older boy, but not quite managing it.
Just looking around, but shouldn't I be asking you that?
The man stepped closer, eyes glinting in the slowly setting sun.
You two seem too young to be out here, hidden in piles of trash. Where are your parents?
Izuku felt his breath catch, and the small gasp sent Shinzo into action. What are you doing here? Shinzo asked, stopping in front of Izuku, raising his metal bat.
Well, isn't that
His voice cut off, Shinzo's quirk coming into play. Answer me! What are you doing here? Shinzo asked again, and the male spoke.
I was out for a walk. I heard noises. I was intrigued.
Who are you? Shinzo asked again.
I go by Darby.
What are you looking for?
Weapons.
Shinzo paused, looking to Izuku. Izuku, he whispered. We said we'd sell unused gadgets, didn't we? Izuku nodded. Do you think we should sell them to him? He might be dangerous. The man certainly looked dangerous, what with his scars and glinting eyes, and that haunted look that seemed to shadow his features. And yet, Shinzo said and nodded. Who else would buy them? He could bring us more customers. And anyways, Shinzo snorted, we can always take him down once we start our careers. Izuku stared at the frozen figure, mind racing. His mind told him to take the chance, to sell to the man. With money, they could buy materials to make better weapons. With better weapons, they could be better vigilantes once they started. Well, being vigilantes. Being better vigilantes meant being able to save more people. Meant being able to protect people who weren't being protected. Meant getting the money that would be needed to buy a home for him and Shinzo. But his heart told him that this was wrong. His heart said that this man could, and was likely, a villain. Who else looked for weapons in a trash pit? The man didn't seem much like a vigilante. He was too calm, too sure of himself to be hiding. But a villain didn't hide. We can take him down later, Izuku told himself, even as his conscience screamed at him. In the end, they didn't turn the man away. They were 8 years old when they made their first customer. Shinzo was right. After the first customer came, more followed. Darby liked their options, and the prices were fair for what they made so far. He bought from them, and then word spread. Need a fairly good weapon for a pretty good price? Head to the Gibber Beach, find the masked boys. By the time the boys were 9, they had a better routine. Get up, go on the morning run, go to the library until lunchtime to learn all that they could and complete their schoolwork. Go back for lunch, go to the beach, train and work on gadgets. Sell to a customer every so often, at least once a week. Rinse and repeat, with occasional escapes in the night to train more or just stroll through town. As the years went by, the two boys watched as the other orphans found families. Familiar faces disappeared, replaced by new ones that they'd never bothered to learn the names of. Izuku and Shinzo watched as new kids came and went, never remembering them once they were gone. It stopped hurting, seeing other kids find parents, by the time the boys were 8. With every passing year, the two spent more time away from the orphanage, more time away from the people who barely noticed their presence, who'd find families who would love them. It didn't really matter that the two were alone, that the two knew they would never be adopted. In a way, they had formed a family of their own. Even if that family was with villains would likely kill them without flinching if they saw one another in the future, if they saw the boys as heroes. But it was something, and it was enough. It was enough to keep the boys from sending longing glances to loving couples searching for kids, despite the fact that they'd never choose anyone like Izuku or Shinzo. It was enough. The villains cared for their orphan boys. The villains saw that they were valuable. One even set up a trade agreement, an alliance of sorts. Free materials would be given to them, access to a lab with the strongest metals and synthetic fabrics in all of Japan. In return, for heavily discounted weapons. Their family, their alliances, their customers. All of it was bitter. Reality was bitter. Both boys felt guilty with every agreement, with every creation sold. But what could they do? They knew what they had to do. Helping villains let them improve, and improvements meant helping others. Besides, they had already sold hundreds of weapons to villains. What was a few hundred more with better materials? I don't like this, Izuku murmured to Shinzo one day, after a customer had walked off with a gun far too powerful for their liking. We'll make up for it in the future, Shinzo promised, even as a frown covered his own masked face. We'll take them all down. We'll save as many people as possible. They were only 9. The fun started when they were 10. The 2 boys were wandering the city, wearing their first attempts at costumes. Ski masks, hoodies, and gloves took over their usual clothes as they patrolled in the night. Then they heard a woman scream, and they moved without thinking. They rushed to the source, hearts racing as they found their target. A thief? Izuku muttered to Shinzo, the boys hidden in the shadows. As they crept closer, the thief threatened the woman, knife in hand. Shaking, the woman handed over her purse. "That wasn't so hard now, was it?" the man asked, voice slick with sarcasm. "It's a shame that you saw my face, though. Can't let you get away to the cops, can I?" Please," the woman cried. "Don't hurt me. I won't." "Sorry, I've heard that one before." The thief sighed, then lifted his knife. "Stop!" Izuku shouted, darting out of the shadows and lunging at the man. The man moved back, the woman collapsing to the ground, shaking. The man laughed. "Oh, what's this?" he asked, eyes lit up with amusement. "A little kid who wants to play hero?" "Not a hero," Izuku said, even as he moved to protect the woman, standing in front of her. "Just someone who wants to help." "As if you're much helping your own, buddy," the man snorted. "How about this? I'll let you run along, since I don't really care for killing pesky brats. Just head on home to mommy and daddy, why don't ya?" Izuku held back his tears as he stood firm. He isn't alone." Shinzo's voice cut through the approaching silence, smooth and calm. "But you are, aren't you?" "Who's out there?" the thief shouted. "Where are you?" He went still. "Ha! Got him!" Izuku cheered, then froze. "Shoot! Rope! He looked around the alley, spotting some rope in the trash. "Nice!" He wasn't one to question such a perfect coincidence. "But help me out here!" In a few minutes, the man was tied up, eyes still blank through it all. Once the thief was dealt with, Izuku took the purse out of his grasp. Turning around, Izuku looked at the still shaking woman. "Are you alright?" he asked softly, and the woman started to cry. "Thank you, boys," she said. "You two saved my life." "That was the goal," Shinzo said awkwardly. The woman laughed, but it was warbled and broken with sobs. "Thank you. Is there anything I can do to help?" The 2 boys looked at each other. They hadn't expected that response. "Can you call the cops to come pick this guy up?" Izuku asked softly. "We can't exactly do that ourselves. We have no phone." "Of course!" The woman pulled out her phone. Then she paused, nodded to herself, and pulled out her wallet. Quickly, she pulled out some money and shoved it into Izuku's hands. "Miss, Please, take it," she said softly. "It's not much, but try to buy yourself something nice. I may not see your faces, but I'm a mother, and know you can't be that old." Izuku was too busy crying to respond, so Shinzo did it for him. "Thank you, miss. Stay safe." "Please," Izuku added. Stay safe." He couldn't imagine someone else losing their mother. He couldn't let that happen. The woman agreed, and the boys disappeared in the night, slipping back to base to hide the money and their outfits before sneaking back into the orphanage. That was their first act of vigilantism. After their first time, Izuku and Shinzo knew they wouldn't be able to restrain themselves any longer. They couldn't keep holding themselves back, not when there were more people to help. When they were 10 years old, Izuku and Shinzo created a new routine once more. Get up, go on a morning run, go to the library until it was time to go back to the orphanage for lunch. In the afternoon, they worked on gadgets and trained. At night, they slipped away to patrol the city at least 3 times a week, searching for danger. They didn't fit the customers, not yet. They were young, and they were itching to help, but they were smart. They might be villains, but they won't hurt us, Shinzo pointed out as they worked on their own projects. I know, but it still feels wrong to let them go free just because they've bought a weapon from us. If we attack one, then none of them will trust us. For now, they're not going to lay a finger on us, but we have to do the same. The words hurt, but Izuku knew where Shinzo was coming from. They were valued, and so they'd be allowed to take down thieves and lower villains. But the ones who were freaking buyers, they couldn't be touched. It's not like you're strong enough to take them down right now, Izuku relented, and the goal to get stronger only seemed bigger. Izuku knew that, being a vigilante, they were in a weird grey area in terms of their morals. To start, the two were kind of sort of breaking the law and all, even if they weren't really. Well, Izuku was fine, because laws basically forgot quirkless people existed, so he was practically a free man if he got caught. Potential fines not really worth thinking about. But still, he was breaking the laws of society in order to help others. That was a weird one. The grey area got hazier when they avoided confronting the villains they sold to, even being able to joke around with some of their more frequent buyers, as odd as the statement sounded. Sure, their reasons were just, but their actions? Izuku never liked some of his actions, and never would. One of the hardest things to come to terms with, though, was stealing. Izuku hated stealing. Shinzo did too. But just selling gadgets and weapons wasn't enough of an income source. Not yet. The income wasn't anything to scoff at, but profits went as high as they needed in order to get out of that orphanage and start living elsewhere. Because as good as the trash dump of a beach was for a base, it wasn't good enough for a home. They had rules for stealing, though. It was only money, and only from the villains and bad guys they stopped. Only from their wallets, to be precise, because neither way wanted to steal money from a bank or some innocent victim. No matter how much money someone had, the boys only took a third. Enough to help some, but not enough to feel too bad. Heroes get paid to help, Izuku said, although he wasn't sure if he was comforting his friend or himself. We're just paying ourselves for taking down the problems, Shinzo added in that same tone, and that was the end of their discussions on the matter. Their routine never changed during that year, the boys constantly moving. Not many noticed their prolonged absences, only a few workers ever made comments. You boys do realize that potential families won't choose you if you're never around, right? Mrs. Hata asked, aged beyond her years from stress yet still trained out the boys, even after 6 years of seeing them. Hata-san, Izuku started softly, trying to ease her guilt. We know. Nobody made comments after, leaving the boys to their own devices. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when his life was ruined. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when he met his best friend and fellow Vigilante, and turned his life around. Izuku Midoriya was 8 years old when he made his first gadget. Izuku Midoriya was 9 years old when he became a weapon and gadget seller to villains. Izuku Midoriya was 10 years old when he started his life of vigilantism. Izuku Midoriya is 11 years old when his story continues. That was chapter 4 of Vigilante and the Vigilante Antics. As the author said, this is kind of the end of the exposition arc. This chapter was really long. That's what I said in the first chapter when I said the chapters are gonna be longer. This is 30 minutes raw material I have to cut. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed this chapter and I'll see you all next time. Bye!